Yeah.
We are live. Welcome to this week's discussion of episode 23 of the BEMA Podcast, Falling on Joyful Faces. Such a weird title if you don't know what they're talking about. Okay, so last week we discussed episode 22, which was... I had it in my head until I started talking about it. Under the chuppah. So last week we talked about God's marriage to the Israelites at Mount Sinai, and the Israelites cheating on God in the middle of the ceremony with a golden calf. And so, rather than rushing out and destroying everybody, God just keeps moving on with the ceremony.
For people just coming in and didn't know anything about the last one, that whole statement you just said just sounded really weird.
Mm-hmm.
So may I? So what Chris was talking about was, if you going back and looking at the Israelites, the Ten Commandments, Moses, and it was like a marriage with the Israelites. And how they did the whole Jewish wedding ceremony is, it's very elaborate and very, very traditional. But basically, it was what Chris was talking about was the equivalent of, imagine, if you would, a wedding ceremony, and because it's going on, because God is talking 40 days, 40 nights with Moses. In the meantime, this whole calf scenario is going on down in the camp, where the Israelites are basically rebelling and committing adultery against God. And so basically, imagine, if you would, because all this is in time, and God, to him, time and is relative. It would be the equivalent of somebody, of the bride, actually committing adultery against the groom with one of the groomsmen at the wedding before the ceremony is even over. It started but hasn't ended, and so I know that's a terrible thing to imagine, but if you can imagine that is basically the Israelites committing adultery against God during the wedding ceremony when Moses is receiving the Ten Commandments, which he breaks, and then he goes back and gets some more, and they talk about the tabernacle. And I'm sorry I interrupted you, Chris.
Yeah, he said on that episode last week he didn't want to compare the golden calf to a groomsman.
Right.
So I think it's more like an ex showed up.
Ex showed up.
Yeah, an ex from Egypt.
An old boyfriend.
An old boyfriend, old flame from Egypt showed up.
Thank you for correcting.
Yeah.
Okay, you're right.
Moses melted him into ash and made them drink.
That was the biggest mind blow for me, was seeing the Ten Commandments as wedding vows.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I'm still my brain's still scrambled over that. I get it, and I understand what he's talking about.
I never would have thought of that.
Yeah.
Never would have thought about that.
Never would have entered my mind.
And that just changes a lot of perspectives. Or not changes, or adds, I would say.
Yeah, it adds, and that's the whole point of this: to add that perspective, which I really
I was thinking about. We have such a sad disconnect from the people who originally became Christians. I was thinking about on the way over here, because the first Christians were who? Jesus' followers. What were they? Jewish people.
Jewish people.
So they had so much background that we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Like, imagine if we could just learn everything they learn, know everything they know, and still be Christians, man.
Yeah.
They forgot more than we'll ever learn.
Yeah, they've definitely probably forgot.
They've
more
taken
than
it
we
with
ever
them.
learned. So this one,
Right.
they start off pointing out a pattern in Exodus. What they say, 24 through 40. They point out a pattern of, then the Lord said to Moses. So in Exodus 25:1, if you're taking notes, or if you already have notes, Exodus 25:1, Exodus 30:11, Exodus 30:17, Exodus 30:22, Exodus 30:34, Exodus 31:1, and Exodus 31:12 all start with, then the Lord said to Moses. So in Exodus, I'm assuming this is Exodus 24. I think I wrote down the wrong thing, but it's...
first one starts with 25.
He says, verse 12, then the Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbaths. This will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come. so you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. And then he calls back to when the God rested in Genesis 2, chapter 2, verses 2 through 3. By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. And then in Exodus 40:33, then Moses set up the courtyard around the tabernacle and altar and put up the curtain at the entrance to the courtyard. And so Moses finished the work. So the key part of that is finish the work, calling back to Genesis 2 when God had finished the work of creation. In Exodus 39:42 through 43, the Israelites had done all the work just as the Lord had commanded Moses. Moses inspected the work and saw that they had done it just as the Lord had commanded. So Moses blessed them. And I love how he points out how the tabernacle is a walking representation of Genesis 1, and how the another word for tabernacle was that word moed. Now it's spelled M-O-E-D, but who knows if that's even correct?
Yeah.
English, from a translation of Jewish,
Of a dead language.
of Israelite or Israeli letters. I don't know how you say that. But the word moed means appointed times and seasons, and we call back to one of our first discussions about the chiasm in Genesis 1, all leading back to times and seasons, which was God's rest. And I love how Mark on Sunday talked about that.
Yeah.
Resting and letting God's
Before-
word
before
soak
ours.
into us, and
Yeah.
Letting-
Read, reflect, and then respond,
yeah,
and then rest.
and then rest, yeah.
And rest, yeah.
4 R's. So I like how in this one they go through and they point out a chiasm that forms between chapters 24 all the way to 40.
Mm.
And so in chapter 24, it's the glory of the Lord.
15
Chapter 24, 15 through 18. And on the back end, it's the glory of the Lord, chapter 40, verses 34 through 38. And then the next one is the tabernacle and priestly garments, which is chapters 25 through 30. And the back end is chapters 36 through 39, tabernacle and priestly garments. And then Bezalel and Oholiab, chapter 31, verses 1 through 11, same two people, 30 through 35. And then right in the middle is the Sabbath.
Wow.
Chapter 31 and chapter 35, and then right in the middle of all that, the Lord says, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest.
Wow. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Mm.
We just miss so much.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm.
we avoid rest. Even in Christianity and American culture, we avoid rest. So anything that talks about Sabbath,
I get 5 hours of it every night.
yeah, that's enough. I'll rest when I
that's a
die,
lot.
right?
I didn't mean to brag. I didn't think I was bragging. I thought, man, you guys are in worse shape than me.
Well, I mean, we live in a society, even in the Christian world, where we're trying to be success. So
Right.
you sleep 8 hours, well, then you're wasting time.
Mm.
You know, if it is to
8
be
hours, you're not making disciples.
You're
Get
not,
to work.
you're not making disciples. You mean you're not spending 6 hours in
In
quiet
the Word,
time?
yeah.
Mm.
You know, you're not beating down doors. You're not standing on street corners.
Getting up very early in the morning.
I mean, you're not spending 6 hours in the studio or 24. Oh man, it's architectural world and studio. You don't leave studio.
Mm.
Mm.
You know, you're not doing everything you can.
Mm.
And so there's that balance we need to seek, and sometimes we just don't realize we're doing all we're supposed to do because God has us to do it, but we're doing our part and forgetting that the rest is allowing God to do His part.
Mm.
Right.
Good
You
point.
know? And there's a fine line between doing your part and trusting God.
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm.
only way you'll know you're doing your part is you take time to rest and ask God, what is your part?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm.
That's a good point.
Very good point. Mm.
I think one of the biggest things, I'm geeking out over I always geek out over the temple tabernacle because to me in the architectural world, And one of the directions I want to go with architecture is designing of churches. And and then, like I was saying earlier, I'm taking this course right now about the history of church architecture and where it came from. And how the ideas are, this is the way it should be because this is ornamentality, it needs to be beautiful. But then you look at the ornaments and have nothing to do with God and everything with man. Versus the church should be plain Jane, no makeup on that barn. And
Abraham's church.
And really, when you look at those ideologies, really have nothing to do with scriptural basis or what God has commanded.
Right.
So if we really want to go back to whatever would be considered holy, the tabernacle is God's specific how to design a church. And so it's interesting. I think for me, mostly because of the combination. The architecture, when I'm interested, the history of the tabernacle, the specifics, every specific. When people say God doesn't care, hasn't read this.
Yeah.
It is interesting though that he was very specific about the tabernacle. And I love it when they, in the podcast, when they were talking about when Moses destroyed the first set of tablets, it was like, okay, now let's talk about the tabernacle. Let's talk about it again.
Yeah.
And it's like, we didn't cover that. It's like,
you want to make sure you beat it in your head.
It was that important.
It was that important.
Yeah.
And fast forward to the New Testament, and then let's fast forward back to the Old Testament, but fast forward to the New Testament, Leviticus, all throughout what we call the Old Testament, the law, there were all kinds of things. The tabernacle, very specific. You had all these ornaments, the priests, the ephod, everything had to be so. The Passover had to be so. The festivals had to be so. And they were very specific, including instruments and things like that. But none of that appears in the New Testament, because in the New Testament we're free. The main thing is to love God. That is still the most important commandment ever. And the second, to love our neighbors as ourselves. And if we do those things, then whatever our churches look like doesn't really matter. But now let's go back to the Old Testament, to Exodus and what God said, about the tabernacle, because you're right, Stephen. It was very important, and you could not get this wrong. You had to get this right, because this was a covenant. This was a marriage. This was a marriage covenant, and you don't want to start a marriage off wrong. So don't do that.
I'll defer.
Don't do that.
So then they went to Leviticus chapter 9, verses 23 through 24. And this really got me whenever... this is where the title of the episode comes from. So Moses and Aaron then went into the tent of meeting. When they came out, they blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat portions on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted for joy and fell face down. And they pointed out a good question, like, usually when you think about falling face down, you think about, good night, they're terrified of something.
Right.
But falling on joyful faces, which is the name of this episode, is what actually happened. They shouted for joy and they fell face down. So I can't imagine a time I was so happy that I fell to the ground.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I know the idea of being slain in the spirit is still controversial, but it's one of those things when the presence of God is so strong on you that you can't stand.
Right.
And it's one of those things, you've been in God's presence, and if you don't know, then you haven't been. And again, it goes back to the experience with God. This is what He wants. This is an experience with God.
Yeah.
And once you've had that experience, it's like that's the aim every time. When we have our quote quiet time, for me, when I get into that place, that's the goal, man. That's the deepest part of intimacy between me and God, knowing that His presence came down. And to that, we're in His presence all the time, but there's a specific
connection
that He ministers to you in I want to call it an unexplainable fashion,
Mm-hmm.
because really there is no explaining other than it was just so heavy
Yeah.
that I couldn't stand.
I've never regretted those times of
Yeah.
getting away and just being with God. I always come back feeling like
Yeah.
you learned something and you're on top of the world. I can't wait for our men's retreat coming up at the end of April. Like, when Roddy suggested that, I was like, yes, let's go out into the wilderness, go out into the forest, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just go out there. Like, I just want to go out.
Build a fire.
Yeah, build a fire. I have created fire. Like on
Oh, man,
what is
stuff.
that movie with Tom
Cast-
Hanks? Castaway. Yeah.
Castaway, yeah.
So the thing that they pointed out about falling face down and shouting for joy was, if they did this in the presence of God at His tabernacle, and we are supposed to be a new tabernacle,
The new tabernacle.
shouldn't people be shouting for joy and falling down on their faces when they meet us? I felt like that was really challenging.
Yeah, because that would be awkward. Someone walking up to you, oh, praise the
Well,
Lord,
yeah.
and falling down on
Yeah, that would be
that
like
awkward.
It would be like in Revelation we were reading, about John. He fell face down before one of the angels.
The
He
angel's
said,
always like, get up.
"Yeah,
now."
get up. I'm a servant like you. Get up. Don't do that." And I think Peter too. Also, somebody bowed down to him, began to worship him as God. He said,
Mhm.
"No, get up."
It's the message
Yeah.
that brings that out in people. When it happened with Peter and John, like, they're bringing the message, and they thought, oh, these are the gods.
and
like,
it was usually followed by a miracle.
Yeah,
I
these
think
are
Peter
the
did
gods.
a miracle.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's definitely convicting because, I think it's been said before that the church is known for what it's against. So when
Really?
when I represent Christ, do I represent him in a way that attracts people, or do I make people feel condemned?
very good point.
And I think for the longest time, personally, when I first came to Lubbock, anybody who reached out to me, it was all about convincing me how I'm not saved unless I went to their church.
yeah.
It had nothing to do with bringing me to Christ, but bringing me to their church. And so when I'm out there and I have an opportunity to share Christ, what am I doing? Am I just, and I'll admit I'm the chiefest of sinners about unloading all the information I know. And I need to
Geeking out.
and I need to stick, because when I start talking about things, I get excited, and then I want to talk about it more.
Pouring too much new wine in that wineskin.
Yeah,
But
it's just going to burst.
But you gotta leave room for the next time.
Yeah.
Got to
Complete
leave them wanting for more.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm with you though. It's hard for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is the place this is why it's convicting, is I need to pay attention to how I represent Christ. Where people turned off because it's always
It
don't
doesn't matter.
stop, quit.
Doesn't matter, because
Mhm.
what's the most important thing is you represent Christ. You open your mouth and you do it. That's the important thing. All we can do is water. Ray plants a seed. Stephen waters. God makes it grow. And I fall into that too. I go, oh man, this guy, he's not going to receive it well. And the worst thing for me to do is pass and just keep my mouth shut and go on my way. That's the worst thing to do. The most important thing to do is seize the opportunity, let God do it. First of all, God sees the opportunity because He's the one putting it on our hearts. Hey, go talk to that person. And then He's going to give us whatever we need to say. And then whether that person responds right then or not, how do we know?
Yeah.
We might plant a seed that, oh man, that was terrible. That guy, he wasn't interested in it all. But maybe, how do we know? That seed. He goes back and he goes, man, that guy, something about him. I don't know. And then all of a sudden, you never know what's going to happen after that. Because we're not always there to see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's God's plan. We expect to see it. We want microwave results. A, B, C, and then boom, we go right down the road and we get to Z or whatever, and we want to see it, we want it right now. That's not how God works. So we never know. All those times we felt like we blew it, man, those might have been the sweetest victories of all.
Yeah, because those seed plantings might take like 10 years.
Yeah. Could be bamboo seeds.
And
7 years before you get
then
anything.
they respond to somebody else.
Is that right? 7 years?
Doesn't
7
even
years
know
for
us.
bamboo?
I
Yeah.
did not know that. Thank you.
Wow.
Pine trees, I think.
Yeah, because I like
Yeah.
I had a recent bamboo experience, so I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's been.
So then they go on to 2 Chronicles, which is where I felt like it really got good. Because when Solomon finished, 2 Chronicles 7, verses 1 through 3, when Solomon finished praying, fire came down from heaven. This is calling back to the last Leviticus one we just read. Fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the temple. The priests could not enter the temple of the Lord because the glory of the Lord filled it.
Wow.
When all the Israelites saw the fire coming down and the glory of the Lord above the temple, they knelt on the pavement with their faces to the ground, and they worshipped and gave thanks to the Lord, saying, He is good, His love endures forever.
Wow.
So what I got from that was the priests couldn't enter because God's glory filled the temple. So am I filled with God in the same fashion? So much that other things can't enter
I see
me.
what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
Like Ray and I were talking on Sunday about our hobbies and how we like to keep our hobbies to ourselves. Like, this is mine. Nobody touched this. And it's like, that shouldn't be. It should be God fills us,
right,
and everything else is out here.
Yeah.
Kneeling down to the God that fills us up. And I felt so challenged by that am I filled with God, or am I making room for other things?
Right. What
Am
are
I
we
pushing
feeling?
him out? Am I only letting him in a little bit?
I think we can take that. I think we can take that a little too far, and then and let that kind of get us into a doubting mode. And I was talking with a good friend, and my concern. I'll go ahead and share this. My concern for my son. I noticed spending time with him, and I've always noticed this with him and his character growing up as a teenager. His love for video games, and I've seen it in adulthood, adult men, spending hours and hours and hours with a video controller. And not saying that that's wrong, Kyle, but but there needs to be some limits on it, and it cannot consume other more important time. Like, I can't imagine a wife or a spouse having to take a second seat to their husband's video game playing, when they really want their attention, And if they're okay with it and they set aside a certain time and that's fine and it works out, that's great. But one of the things that concerned me about my son is not only would he spend hours and hours playing video games, but when he wasn't playing video games, I noticed, we were in Puerto Rico on our trip, and I'm trying to get him, come on, let's go to the beach, let's go do something, hey, we're here in paradise, come on. It's snow and ice back where we just left. Sorry guys, but hey, there's a beach right over there. Let's go. He's like, no, I want to rest. I'm looking at his phone, and he's watching videos on his phone, and they were videos of
people playing video games.
Yeah. Okay, you're aware of this.
Yeah.
I'm like, is this a real thing?
Yeah. People make money.
There's even There's even people who watch people
I have to
people
pry the
playing
kids
video games.
away from both Karen and Ava. I have to pry them away from the TV at times.
Some people, that's their career, man.
Well, and it does things to the brain. And I don't mean to take up our time here, but and then somebody helped me realize, what? It's okay to have a diversion. He needs to have a diversion. We all need to have whether it's a hobby, that's fine. But we're human. I don't think a diversion is okay. And we can still have those diversions, and I think we can still be filled with the Holy Spirit, still filled with God, but this, I'm trying to envision this scene in 2 Chronicles 7, where Solomon, the temple, David couldn't build the temple, but Solomon could, and now the temple is here, and now God's presence is behind the curtain, and no one can enter it. Wow. I can't imagine that. I want to imagine that, but even my imagination can't fully experience that.
Like, how did the glory manifest itself? Was it a heavy light with heat?
Oh, it had to be
Was it
fire.
smoke?
It
Yeah.
had to be fire. It had to be
Something.
thunder. It had to be
Sound
lightning,
wave,
flash,
and his
blinding
voice.
lights. Oh yeah, and I mean, probably if you take Revelations and this and put them together, oh
Was it
man,
was it Ezekiel who talked about his voice being like a flowing river?
yes, yes.
You ever heard
I
of
was
the
thinking
rushing
of that.
river?
I didn't know how to express it. Thank
And
you.
then the sound wave of that could have just been so compressing.
Can't imagine. Wow. And also it talks about God's voice. It's like a thunder. When Saul was on the road to Damascus, Jesus was speaking to him, but his travelers, his partners, only heard the thunder. They only heard the thunder.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to me how God can isolate that, and He can reveal things and allow certain people to see and hear things, while others, hey, what was that noise?
Mm-hmm.
What was that racket going on?
And in my experience, sometimes it's also a stillness,
Yes.
calm.
Yes.
Like you ever sat in water where it's perfectly still?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It kind of feels like that too, in those places where it's just you just can't move, can't speak,
Good point.
trying not to breathe too heavy.
Just taking it in.
Just this stillness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the point that brought me to, after all that, was a question that I was asking myself at the end. Is, am I this same mobile reminder of God's tabernacle?
Mm.
Am I the same reminder of God's rest
Right.
from Genesis 1? And most of the time I'm just thinking about what they're telling me, but for some reason today I was thinking, I was applying it to myself more. Probably because the first thing they pointed out was, are people jumping for joy because of the Spirit that fills me? Or am I repelling them? Like the magnet, the other side of the magnet that repels everything.
Yeah. Because when they think about you and your relationship, when they think about you, when they think about God, is God this God of wrath, or is He this God of rest? I think Mark's one who I think heard said it. It's an obvious thing or an expected thing that there will be people who don't like me because of Christ. But God forbid people would dislike Christ because of me. So, the way I represent Christ, how am I showing Him this God of love who forgives and I can find rest, or is He the God that punishes me, So I grew up in around the old time religion. God broke my arm to get my attention. God gave me cancer to teach me something. Man, if y'all did to y'all's kid what we say God did to us, y'all be in jail. You know what I mean? You wouldn't have your kids. And then there's, you've always heard around those people who give their testimony to give more glory to the devil than they. I used to do $1,000 worth of cocaine a day, and then God changed me around, and now I just stay at home watching TV. Yeah, I want to come to that God. And like growing up, the thing that turned me away from God was people were always sick, always broke, always depressed, but follow Jesus and be like me. I could hardly move. I'm always sick, and I love the Lord. Well, apparently He don't love you, And so when I think about how I'm representing Christ, am I leaning on this God of punishment? The God is waiting for you to die, then get glory? Or am I representing this God who really loves and cares? I mean, one of the things I find interesting from this calf story, the adultery God, it seemed like, and this is just my observation, God was like, okay, we're done, let's move on. Like He forgot about it almost instantaneously.
Right.
It was forgiven without being asked.
Yeah, Moses was the one that did so.
Yeah.
He was the one that ground it up in the powder and made everybody
He was
drink
more
it.
mad about this than God was. It was like, God's up on the mountain. Hey, go. You might want to go check that out. Like it's like your kids are
There's
playing.
something going on over there. You better go see what's happening.
All of a sudden, the kids are quiet.
You know something.
Something's up. Go,
Yeah.
go deal with it and come back. And how do we deal with our issues like that? Oh man, we're going to do that for days. We're going to remember the rest of our life. I was such this, such that. I messed up, or I remember when you messed up. I remember I came to your church and you didn't shake my hand.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
You can come say hi to
Oh,
me.
wow.
You didn't say my hand. You didn't say hi to me.
Oh my goodness.
You know?
Yeah.
But God just, like it wasn't a big deal. And obviously it is, because it's sin, and it was adultery against God. But we seem to think that this is how we're supposed to remember God, is God's going to remember. You're sick because you sinned. But God's trying to teach you a lesson. That's not a proper representation of who God is. Obviously, we're learning more about who God is through these BEMAs. So when I represent God, I have to pay attention that this is what it is. And sometimes we don't realize God caused me to lose this job. God really did me wrong, but and then is that what people's view of God is through me? And so this really, talking about us, the new temple, really is convicting or challenging, like you would say.
Yeah, because the last question I was asking myself is, does the glory of the Lord fill me? Like, am I full of the glory of the Lord?
Yes, but not yet.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, not yet.
Yeah.
Now,
Wow, that's-
Yeah. In Philippians 1:6, it says, "Now I'm sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ." Yeah. And in Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not be conformed by this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." So yeah, you are. Just not yet.
Not yet. That's okay.
That's okay.
I can wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking when they fell down on their face, and you were talking about, if you're in the presence of God, you don't know what's going to happen. And I think about the song "I Can Only Imagine" when he says, "Will I dance for you, Jesus?
Oh, I already know what I'm
Or in
gonna
all
do.
you be still, or will I fall to my knees?" Like,
These-
that's what I feel like
That's
I'm going to
what
do. I'm
I'm
just
gonna-
going to fall down
I
and be
know.
like,
And I don't know if it's going to be joy. It's just these ain't going to work
Yeah,
when that happens.
my legs are jello. So
Yeah, and if there's gravity, I know I'm only going one place, right down on that ground or whatever it is.
Yeah, Ray and I were talking about The Chosen on Sunday. I was telling him how every time I see a representation of Jesus, I get emotional.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what he looks like in that representation. Like on, I was telling him about Upside Down.
Yeah.
Even in Upside Down, I get emotional.
I
when
get
Jesus
emotional.
comes. He's only on there for a little bit, but I'm just like,
Yeah, only a couple of times.
let me tell you something, Peter.
The beginning and the
It's
end.
like, yes, tell him, Jesus.
I love it when he gets hold of Abby.
Well, I got to send you another movie then to get you emotional.
Oh, the other thing they recommended, I posted in GroupMe.
Mhm.
It was another one of those videos, and he was
Oh.
walking through Egypt.
Mm.
And on the video, he was talking about God taking the pagan symbols of Egypt and kind of flipping them for his use.
Okay.
And he's like, God isn't involved in paganism, but he takes what they already know
Yeah.
and then changes it. And it reminds me of all the
He transforms.
podcasts that we've been through so far with Moses.
Yeah.
Been plenty of flood stories, but this is God's flood story. This is all these other gods did this to kill you. I'm trying to save you.
Yeah.
So it's like, so it made me think, if that was the case, how much of that went into them making the golden calf?
Mm.
It's like everything we know has been from Egypt so far. So it's like, oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
this guy Moses left, let's make a calf to intercede on our behalf.
There's too much of Egypt.
And then Moses is like, no, dummies, I'm still here.
Yeah.
I like on the history of the world.
Yeah.
With Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks.
Oh, yeah.
He's
When
15.
Moses comes down, these 10 commandments. So good. This is a really short episode, but it felt like it was so packed with challenges.
Oh, very
Oh
much.
man, so much,
Yeah.
so much to gain from this. I think you can still keep going.
Mm-hmm.
This is where the counseling center is?
Oh,
Uh,
the counseling center.
Yeah, they told me the Barnacroft Center.
No,
No.
but you're in the Lubbock Mission Church, though. You're in a good place. You're quite all right. Come back, please. Okay, we'll be here on Sundays at 10. Oh, I'm
Oh.
sorry. Good luck. Hope you find it. But come back, please.
Counseling center?
I have no idea.
Oh, yeah.
Burkhart. I've heard the name Burkhart Counseling Center here.
She has the address. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's our discussion for this week. It was a short podcast episode, so it's a short discussion. Join us next week as we do number 24. It's up on our Facebook page, the Lubbock Mission, not the Lubbock Mission, the Lubbock BEMA discussion group.
Yeah.
Yeah, mouthful.
Just hit the link and don't forget to like and share.
Like and share.
Like a chair.
Thank you for joining us.